and I'm talking about the two major football programs in this state. Thank you very much for tuning into I'll Say This, as we have been marked safe from another chapter in the Michigan State rivalry. We are going to discuss this thoroughly, as we had no Lions this week. They had a bye week as they march on following that huge win on Monday night against Tampa Bay. Tigers baseball is obviously over. Maybe we talk about a little bit of offseason news, though not a whole lot has changed, quite frankly. And I think I'm going to talk about a little bit of Michigan basketball. They played an exhibition in Madison Square Garden against St. John's, and I want to discuss that a little bit, as this team's going to come into the year with very high expectations, and I'm really looking forward to that. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, at Castellani2014 on Twitter. We're on TikTok as well. You can find us on YouTube. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. You can find us in audio form on Apple Podcasts, audio form on Spotify. And CastellaniContent.com is being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I are creating. Super excited. All right, let's jump into it. Michigan takes care of business. They take down Michigan State for the fourth year in a row. All of them night games. So if you're looking for a statistic that's going to piss off Michigan fans, Michigan hasn't won a day game against Michigan State since 2019. But hopefully that will change at some point in the future. But Michigan takes care of business 31-20 against MSU, in a game that I'm really having a hard time talking about. I've had to do multiple takes for my post-game video. I've kind of been stumbling over my words talking about this game on the podcast here. And it's because I think when it comes to this rivalry, it's different with Michigan-Ohio State because the stakes are always so high. It's at the end of the season. There's so much to talk about. But with this game, what you want is either an incredibly intense game that's super close, that comes down to the wire, like 2021, or the triple overtime game in 04, or the Mario Manningham catch in 07, or trouble with the snap, any one of those, or you want the spectacular, right? We've been the victim of it in 2013 with the minus 48 rush yards, the 49-0 bludgeoning 2 years ago by Michigan, the 49-3 blowout in 02 that led to Bobby Williams getting fired. Take your pick. This is one that falls totally in between that. Michigan won. I would say they won decisively. They deserve to win. It was not the spectacular failure that I think a lot of Spartan fans were worried for, and even depending on who you ask, what some Spartan fans were hoping for, because they're just so tired of Jonathan Smith. But Michigan won the game, and I want to talk about both these teams extensively, because I think that they're two teams in much different places as programs right now. I do want to start with Michigan, and I feel bad sometimes because I never want to take for granted success in this sport. I'm a guy who grew up watching some brutal Michigan teams. I've seen 3-9. I've seen 5-7. I've seen losing to Ohio State, 10 years in a row. Like it's not fun, right? And I don't want to be super critical of a 6-2 team, and I'm going to, but I do want to start off with the positives, and that's the fact that I thought Michigan's game plan coming into the game defensively on Saturday was brilliant. And considering the fact that there was really one thing about Michigan State that scared me, and it's the vertical passing game and the Aiden Childs-Nick Marsh connection, I was worried that if they hit on a few of those home run balls early on, was able to get momentum, get the crowd into the game, I was worried Michigan could get into a bit of a dogfight and be forced to go against their identity as a team that's trying to run the football consistently as they would be playing from behind. That did not happen. I thought the defensive game plan was just tremendous. I thought it was as bad as I've seen Aiden Childs in his 2 years at Michigan State. Some of that is him, admittedly, but I think a lot of it is Michigan. This is a quarterback that's very athletic. He likes to extend plays. He likes to use his legs. His legs were a non-factor in Saturday's game. When he did try to extend plays, the coverage downfield was excellent. They never hit on anything big. There's going to be a play here or there, but there was not a moment in Saturday's game where it felt like Michigan State's offense was in any sort of rhythm. And it's the thing about Wink Martindale that is his greatest strength and his greatest weakness as a defensive coordinator, which is his game plans. I don't think we often see a whole lot of adjustments from Wink. I think what this defense is going to be from the jump. Against USC, they got screened to death and never adjusted. And this game against Michigan State, I thought that they were totally sound. They wrapped up outside of a few missed tackles in the second quarter. They were disciplined, which is something I'm going to discuss here in a second. And Jimmy Rolder, man, performance of a lifetime. I mean, talk about instincts on a football field. There was something to be said about a guy, especially defensively, who was involved in every single consequential play in that game. He was the MVP of that game, man. He was really incredible, all the way from the recovery in the first quarter off the Aiden Childs fumble. Not an easy play, by the way. Not an easy play right on the sidelines. I've seen guys literally and figuratively fumble that or cough that up. For him to hold on to it led to points for Michigan, and I think that was really that was a punch in the gut to Michigan State as they were kind of thinking to themselves, here we go again. Even though Michigan didn't really run away with it until the second half, I think that was a huge moment. You have to come into these games strong, especially on the road, regardless of what opponent you're playing. Michigan was able to do that with the early turnover, and while Michigan, I figured, was going to win the game and was in line to win the game, there was a brief moment there in the fourth quarter where it seemed like Michigan State was on the verge of making it interesting. They had 2 fourth down plays in Michigan's territory, and Rolder snuffed them both out. It was great to see. Look, we were blessed 2 years ago with a generational defense that didn't have a goal line situation until game number 10, I think, against Penn State, which is insane. I'll be honest, I bet we never see that again in my lifetime. That defense was so insanely good. In general, teams move the ball against other teams' defenses. And I think that this defense, as talented as they are, there's a lot of bend, but they haven't broken. And the last 2 weeks, I think they've brought arguably their 2 best performances of the season. Now, it frustrates you because with this much talent, why were they getting just, hammered by Oklahoma? Why were they getting hammered by USC? I know those teams are fine, though Mateer's fallen off, but hey, we can only focus on the present. They've played great the last 2 weeks, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Michigan State got a garbage time touchdown at the end with their backup quarterback, where Michigan, for the first time all game, committed a few dumb penalties, but besides that, super clean defensive game. The other thing I want to point out, and I alluded to it a minute ago, Michigan was the more disciplined team in this game, and I kind of saw it coming because Jonathan Smith, who we will discuss extensively here, but Jonathan Smith last year received criticism for not understanding the rivalry and not bringing an intensity to the rivalry that Michigan State fans want to see. And I felt like, because they're not a particularly well-coached team, that their version of intensity was going to be shoving, kicking, taunting, and getting personal foul penalties. That's exactly what we saw. 12 penalties overall for Michigan State on Saturday. I can't recall how many of those were unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. I want to say at least 3. But Michigan played a cleaner game. They were the more disciplined team. And for a unit and a group that I have criticized for being a team that has shot themselves in the foot quite a few times this year, in this particular game, the discipline won. And I think that was something, and Sharon talked about it in the post-game press conference. That was something that they've talked about all week. And it's an annoying thing with rivalry games where there's this idea that in order to be successful or to bring the energy required, you have to bring a hatred and I would just go as far as to say a stupidity to this game that costs you points and costs you drives, right? The fact is, you know what matters in rivalry games? Winning the game. I don't care if you do it with the intensity of a serial murderer, and I don't care if you do it with the intensity of somebody shopping for tapioca pudding. Okay, the fact is, what matters is winning and bringing intensity to this game. That's how you do it. It's not about, puffing your chest out and shoving and standing over people on, and committing personal fouls. It's playing smart football. Michigan, which is a team I've criticized for this in the Sharon Moore era, played much smarter football on Saturday than Michigan State. It was one of the reasons why they were able to pull away in the second half. Defense really good. Positive sign. Look, you pulled away. You didn't quite cover because of that garbage time touchdown, but as a whole, you're 6-2, and you're in the top 25. I think you're up to 21 in the AP poll. You're in a soft part of your schedule, and I don't think they're really going to sweat out these next few weeks. They are important games because the writing's on the wall, like I said. That's what we led off the show with, of where you can be going into Ohio State, and this is where I kind of transition into some of the negatives. I'll be honest. This current Michigan team right now, if the team that we saw this week against Michigan State, and generally the team that we've seen this season up to this point, if they were to play Ohio State right now, they would get demolished. And I understand weird things happen in rivalry games. I understand the way last year went. This is different. I'm telling you it's different. And for people that are trying to demand why, it's just a vibe thing. One, this might be the best Ohio State team I've ever seen. This team is stacked top to bottom, offensively, defensively. There is no exploitable weakness. Now, they coached themselves out of a victory last year, and that could happen again. Ryan Day could repeat that same mistake. All right, but the fact is, over the next several weeks, I need to see a Michigan team that is a lot tighter. The discipline issue seems like it's been improving, but the fact is, they continue to have offensive game plans that baffle me. And whether you want to put it on Chip Lindsey or Sharon Moore, at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards putting it a little bit more on Sharon because I think at their worst, this offense just kind of looks like a carbon copy of last year. And Kirk Campbell ain't here anymore. The only common denominator is that Sharon Moore's been the head coach. I think that he still has a fair say in what plays are called. I could be wrong about that. But you are going up against a Michigan State team on Saturday that had a clear weakness, and it's their defense. And people were coming away from that game saying, hey, Michigan State's defense, they played tough. And they played tough, yes. Like, the effort was very clearly there. Michigan's game plan in the first half, where they came out like they were Mike Leach's 2006 Texas Tech Red Raiders, and they were going to air it out 50 times a game, made absolutely no sense to me. Michigan is a running team. I understand it's an inexperienced O-line. I get it. You have two thoroughbred running backs, and you give them the ball as often as you can, and you wear down MSU's front seven. That's what happened in the second half. In the first half, they were trying to get Bryce going. It didn't work. You do give Michigan State credit for that. The coverage downfield was good, but it's a combination of the fact that you don't have any really good receivers. Your best guy right now is a true freshman, Andrew Marsh, who I do like. And I'll be honest, Bryce wasn't good. And I understand he's a true freshman. I get it. But I didn't think he played a very good game on Saturday. Some of that was his fault. A lot of it was his fault. Some of it wasn't. But we're getting kind of deep into the season now, and I think he's starting to suffer from some of those issues that I often complain about with quarterbacks, which is, being more of an athlete and not necessarily a quarterback. Do I think he'll improve? Of course he'll improve. I think he's going to be a wonderful player. But he was outside of maybe one or two plays, and he did have the rushing touchdown. He wasn't much of a factor on Saturday. And you were able to get by against Michigan State doing that. And he has played some good games. I thought he played very well against Washington. But you're going to need a better version of Bryce Underwood if you want to win the important games in your schedule. And I think at this point, you know what game I'm talking about. Him throwing for over 100 yards just ain't going to do it. Now, in the second half, I thought the offensive line came alive. They finally smarted up. They gave the ball to Justice Haynes, who had a big game. They gave the ball to Jordan Marshall, who popped off the big run at the end and had over 100 yards. That is how you are going to win games this season, and that's how they've done it with Sharon. I mean, this offensive line has gotten better, especially with the running backs they have behind them. These two running backs are capable of wearing down anybody. I mean, I think both these guys are going to be in the NFL one day. They're both really, really good. And as we saw several years back when Cade McNamara was the quarterback here, if your offensive line can be that solid and get that much of a push, and you can just wear teams down with the running backs that you have, like Michigan had with Haskins and Corum in 2001, maybe this is a Michigan team that ends up surprising some people. But I think they need to be much smarter with their offensive play calling. And I talk all the time about discipline and how I think that they improved on Saturday, and they did. But what's frustrating about this Michigan team is I don't think there's one particular thing that you look at and say, that's bad. But they'll have a good drive that they're putting together. They're about to finish off a game, and then Justice Haynes fumbles. They'll have a drive that they're sustaining, and then there will be a drop pass. They'll be on the verge of potentially backing a team up towards their own end zone, and they'll have a shanked punt. It's just these little things. Anthony Broom's talked about it a million times. I've talked about it. The attention to detail. Those little things that I think are very often the separation between a good team and a great team. I think this is a fine team. I don't think that they check off all the boxes of being a great team. Now, things can change, right? But it's an inexperienced group, and these next few weeks, I think, should be an opportunity for them to grow a little bit, to develop a bit more confidence. And, I make the 2021 comparison. People had eulogized them after that loss to Michigan State. They had some games after that, and especially going to Penn State and winning. They got a lot more confidence under their belt, and you just felt going into that game in 21 against OSU that something was a little bit different. Maybe this team has that kind of vibe. But I think they've benefited from their schedule, quite frankly. Last year, every team that had a pulse that they played before Ohio State, they lost to. This year, the schedule's been a bit easier, and they've benefited from it. You don't apologize for it by any means. And I do still think that they're a good team, but I saw nothing on Saturday from Michigan State where I went, okay, they're playing out of their minds. Or they're doing something today that I haven't seen them do all season. I thought Michigan, once again, as they've had a tendency to do, really played with their food. And you can get away with that against Michigan State. You can get away with that against Wisconsin. When you play the boys that matter, that's not going to work. And we've already seen it against Oklahoma. We already saw it against USC. And, they're going to have one more true test to show that they are a complete football team. And that's going to be, a month from now in Ann Arbor. All right. I do want to talk about Michigan State here because as of now, and I'm recording this at 8:06 p.m. on Sunday, October 26th, Jonathan Smith is still the coach at Michigan State, and I think he will remain the coach at least until the end of the year. One of the reasons why I'm not jumping up and down in exuberant celebration because of Michigan beating Michigan State, which I am happy they won. I'm always happy to see them win this game. Michigan State is just a bad football team. And I've been open about their struggles. I mean, as early as the Youngstown State game, I was saying, like, guys, I think there's some serious issues here. I don't think this defense is very good. But I have pointed to a few positives where I felt like, all right, if you catch the right breaks, this could be a team in 2025 that by the end of the year, even the middle of the season, is one you don't necessarily want to play. Like, it's crazy to say this, last year, I didn't feel good going into the Michigan State game. Michigan State had just beaten Iowa. It felt like they were starting to get some identity back, starting to win at the line of scrimmage again, which they hadn't done really in the Tucker era outside of the Kenneth Walker season. They've just gone backwards ever since that game. I mean, every single game it's felt like they've gone backwards. Jonathan Smith has been hilariously outcoached in the second half of games in his entire tenure, and that was on full display on Saturday. Even the positives, quote unquote, that I see in Michigan State weren't positives on Saturday. Childs was just a mess. And you know, Marsh wasn't great. You put a lot of that on the quarterback. They popped off for one big run, really, where Michigan, missed a few tackles. The effort was there. I don't think it's an example of him losing the team, losing the locker room, but there's not a lot of talent here. And in the modern age with the portal where you can bolster your roster pretty quickly, the lack of talent falls on the coaching staff as well. I don't think that they're a very physical team. I don't think that they're a very disciplined team. And I just got to be real with you. I just don't think there's a lot of talent here. As a unit, I thought their defense played about as well as they could have played for a heavy majority of it, but Michigan State doesn't have anybody on their defense who over 60 minutes is going to contain Justice Haynes or contain Jordan Marshall. And once Michigan remembered that those guys were on the roster again, they started giving them the ball and they ran them over. Yes, okay, I guess I got to bring this up. The offsides penalty, damn close, right? And if this was a tightly contested game that came down to the second where Michigan had to kick a field goal to win, I'd feel differently about it. And I would understand the criticism and the argument, but Michigan State didn't do enough to win on Saturday. And they weren't doing enough to win up until that point. And to be honest, even if that play stands and there's no penalty and Michigan State gets the ball back, they weren't moving the ball. Childs wasn't completing passes. They couldn't get any sort of rhythm offensively, and I'm inclined to believe, based on what I saw on every other drive, that would have continued. Tough break, but that's kind of the way things have gone for Michigan State this year. They haven't been able to make their own breaks, and they haven't been able to catch their own breaks. And I didn't come away from Saturday, I talked about it earlier, feeling as though it was disaster. They didn't get booed off the field necessarily, and Jonathan Smith didn't have a Bobby Williams moment in the locker room where he said he wasn't sure if he'd lost the team. But they're just, sounds mean, they're just lame. They're just not a very good ball club. There's not a whole lot that you can look at and feel like you can be positive about. And for that reason, I think the writing is clearly on the wall. Like I said at the beginning, I think he'll be out at the end of the season. And look, there's going to be a lot of coaches available. I will have a deeper discussion when it inevitably happens about what I think the Michigan State football program can be in the modern age, because I push back against the people who believe that 2013 to 2015 is repeatable, and I'll discuss that, cross that bridge when we get to it. With that said, they can be better than this. And I think that is the big thing. I tweeted it out. I think that is the big thing that has Michigan State fans so frustrated right now, at least as it pertains to this rivalry, is there's been years, especially in recent history, where Michigan has just had a squad, and Michigan State could have lined up 100 times against Michigan and they weren't going to win. 22, 23, those teams that Michigan had were just dynamite. I mean, that 23 team, even with Mel Tucker getting fired and all that nonsense that came with it, Michigan wasn't losing that game. I mean, Michigan just came into Spartan Stadium and just steamrolled them, and they would have done it every single day of the week had they have had the opportunity. You look at these 2 years under Jonathan Smith, and look, Michigan State hasn't been very good. Guess what? Neither is Michigan. Michigan's been kind of a mess. This is a team that's lost 7 games in the last 2 years. Last year, they didn't have a quarterback. We didn't know who their quarterback was going to be in this game until that Saturday when they suited up. I mean, Michigan went from Davis Warren to Alex Wargy to Jack Tuttle back to Davis Warren, and you lost that game in large part because you made some questionable coaching decisions. You lost the turnover battle. Right, you were kind of outcoached in the second half, whether it was Michigan doing the read option with Alex Orji or the trick play to Colston Loveland. And then in this game, I thought Michigan offensively had a 4 out of 10 game plan and a 4 out of 10 performance, and you still lost by multiple scores. That's got to be the most concerning part, is the fact that even with the losses, the gap is not getting more narrow. The gap feels like it's widening between these two teams. I'm not a believer in moral victories, right? But in Mark D'Antonio's first year at Michigan State with a team that I think ended up going 7-6, they had a 10-point lead against Michigan in the fourth quarter of that game. And obviously that led to the Manningham play and the little brother comments, after the game, that kind of set a lot of stuff in motion. But it was very clear from the jump that D'Antonio's teams were going to play Michigan very tough. Whether Michigan was good like they were that year or bad like they were under Rich Rod, it didn't matter. MSU always brought something to this game under Mark D'Antonio that they haven't brought in the 2 years under Jonathan Smith. These were winnable games. Michigan has exploitable weaknesses. They're a vulnerable club. They had a true freshman quarterback this year who didn't play a very good game. And you just don't have it where it counts. Like, it's not that I'm looking at it going, oh my God, it's so awful, it's the worst football I've ever seen. It's just nothing stands out. It's like watching a random 4 out of 10 action movie on TNT on a Saturday. Like, okay, this isn't terrible, but I've seen a million things like this. There's nothing about this that stands out from anybody else. And I think that's where Michigan State fans feel a lot of fear right now, is that they're kind of just getting lost in the fold. This is just another program. And look, Jonathan Smith, again, as of the time of this recording, has not been let go. But one thing that Spartan fans need to accept right now is that this is a significantly weaker job than it was when Mark D'Antonio retired. And I'll be real, I think it's a weaker job than it was when Mel Tucker got fired. I think that the Michigan State football brand has taken a very serious hit over the last several years, not to mention the fact that we live in the age of the portal and we live in the age of NIL, and you have an athletic program that has been very coy about how they're going to go about their business when it comes to spending. You need to have some sort of commitment. You could hire a great coach. You could hit a home run with your next hire. You're going to have to make some sort of commitment to spending, or else you're going to be mired in mediocrity for the next 10 years. That's, at some point you gotta own up to it. And that's where the Michigan State football program finds themselves right now. I'll do a greater eulogy if and when Smith is inevitably fired, but I think that the way things went for them on Saturday is indicative of the way things have gone over these, I think the way things went on Saturday is indicative of the way things have gone for Jonathan Smith in these 2 years, which is it the worst thing ever? No, but it's still a pretty lame product. It's just like non-buttered stale popcorn. It's edible, but stinks. All right, I think I've exhausted all I can about the Michigan State game in football this year. Again, we'll talk more about it. Michigan's got Purdue next, so they should blow out Purdue. I mean, Purdue's been goddamn terrible for a long time, but we'll talk about it when that happens. I do want to talk about a little bit of Michigan basketball news. I didn't discuss this on last week's show, but they had played an exhibition game against Cincinnati at home where they lost. They were down by, I think, as much as 19 or 20. Came back, cut it to, I think, 2. Ended up losing. They were without 2 of their big men. And, look, it's an exhibition, so it doesn't count. But I was paying more attention to the Saturday exhibition that they played against St. John's. And I'll be honest, man, why isn't this a regular season game? Preseason number 5 versus preseason number 7 in Madison Square Garden. Put that shit on national TV. I want that shit in Feast Week. Didn't get it. Thanks. The Feast Week is on ESPN, by the way, during Thanksgiving for people who, I think it's still a thing. But Michigan won. Michigan won in overtime against a St. John's team coached by Rick Pitino that I think is going to be really good. And look, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about exhibitions. Okay, even I don't want to bore you to death. These games, they don't count, and especially in the world of college basketball, the team you see in the early part of the season is often so drastically different from the team you'll see even by Christmas. So a lot can change. I'm not going to do a full analysis. Here's the 2 things I will say about this Michigan team that I've noticed just through their 2 exhibitions and from some of the clips that I've seen on social media. Number one, and I'm gonna be conducting the hype train. Now, I'm not the first. The guy was the number 1 ranked player in the portal. I usually hate it when people say stuff like this, but I don't think Michigan basketball has ever had a player like Yaxel Lendeborg. And I saw that he's preseason, first-team All-American. This is the first time since Trey Burke where I thought Michigan had a national player of the year potential guy on their team. He has a bit of everything. He can drive. He's going to be an all Big Ten defender. He's going to be an all Big Ten scorer. Last year when Michigan was really struggling at points, they had instant offense with Vlad Golden, who kind of bailed him out in the second half when the shooting fell off. You have instant offense and you have instant defense with Yax. I think he has the potential to be a special player here. I didn't go pro. I'm glad he didn't. He's at Michigan. There's a chance he goes in the top 5-10 in this upcoming draft. This guy is going to be insanely good, and I think will carry them at points. And I like this roster a lot. But when they need a bucket, got to imagine they're going to be going to Yax. He's going to be special. The other thing that I'm just paying attention to, and I found this fascinating, is the way that Dusty is going to go about coaching this team and talking about this team. I felt like last year, and of course, it was a much different roster. He completely flipped the roster in the portal. I get it. But our previous image of Michigan basketball was that of an 8-win team, right? And I felt like last season there was an appreciation for every victory. Well, they had a lot of talented players. A lot. I mean, they made the Sweet 16. There was sort of this underdog mentality from the start. A lot of these guys were looking for homes. They found them at Michigan. They moved the lineups around a little bit. Roddy Gale was a starter. Then he came off the bench. And then Vlad Golden started off a little bit rough, then really came along. They really didn't know what they had, I feel like. With this team comes expectations. And Dusty is a ultra competitive guy, and I think he's extremely aware of that. And it's an exhibition, but despite getting a win against a top 5 team in Madison Square Garden on Saturday, he said something on a social media video that I found very interesting. In the locker room, he said, "We're not a good team yet." And I think it kind of requires a lot of balls as a coach to say that. He said, "We got good players. We're not a good team yet." And I think the way that he's going to coach this team is going to be with a little bit more intensity this year because of what the expectations are. And he knows how good this roster is. And I think he knew how good last year's roster was as well, but it's just different. It was year one. He's still getting used to the University of Michigan, still getting used to campus. A lot of these guys were just kind of getting a feel for what it was like to play at Michigan. There's returning guys this year. There's portal guys this year. This is a team that's going to have, that's going to play in the headlights. This is a team that's going to play meaningful games, nationally televised games, that's going to be talked about as one of the better teams in the Big Ten, maybe even in the country. I think he's going to push them to be great consistently because he knows that this could be, with the talent they have, a very special team. College basketball is unpredictable. You never quite know how these guys are going to gel. They did have a ton of turnovers in Madison Square Garden, which still scares me, but this is going to be a team worth following. Last year's was as well. Last year was a fun year, but I think that in many ways, the teams or the kind of teams that Dusty wants to assemble here at Michigan is going to be reflective of the group that they have in year two. Year one, they did everything possible. I thought Dusty, took over at a time when things were kind of tumultuous. He put together the best roster he could, and they made the Sweet 16. There were no excuses this year. He went out, and they built, and they had the money, and they got the players, and with that comes expectations, and hopefully with those expectations comes a lot of success. I really am interested in watching them, and Michigan State, who I will preview at some point here in the near future. We got some games at some point in November. So college basketball, man, around the corner. Interesting time. I'm looking at the clock right now. I don't really have anything else to add about Tiger stuff, and I apologize if people are looking for it. More reports came out. I think Tarrick's going to get traded. We'll talk about it when it happens. Same with the signings and everything. I did a video talking about the World Series if you want to check that out on my Twitter page. But for the time being, I don't really have much other Tiger news to report. We'll be back next week with what will be a more loaded episode. Obviously, the Lions will be back in full swing, Michigan playing and everything. So a lot to look forward to. I appreciate all of your continued support. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. If you are watching this, we're on TikTok. We're on TikTok, baby. It's all good. Go to YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Audio form on Apple Podcasts, audio form on Spotify, CastellaniContent.com being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. And of course, thank you to Austin Sisler, my friend and my producer, who continues to do a wonderful job as the artist behind the lens. We're going to continue to grind. Let us know what you guys want to see. We're going to keep doing the podcasts, and we got, and I talked about last week, about 7, 8 more weeks, and then we're going to take a little holiday break, and that will be here before we know it, but we are going to go balls to the wall, full effort here as we continue to grow and evolve with our content, and we appreciate all of your continued support. So I will talk to you all again real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.